When the markets collapsed, the data screamed before the people did. At 2:46 a.m., Bitcoin lost 40% of its value in 11 minutes. By 2:52, panic had reached every exchange from Seoul to Zurich. By 3:03, the algorithms that were supposed to stabilize liquidity began feeding on each other like starving animals. And somewhere between those seconds, while millions watched their balances vanish, Clara Holt, daughter of the sitting U.S. president, gained her first $1 billion. The number appeared on her private ledger without sound, a sterile, glowing puff 1,004,000 in a terminal no journalist would ever see. She stared at it for 3 long breaths, unsure whether to feel awe or guilt. Both were luxuries she'd soon learn to abandon. Clara was not a trader, she was a policy strategist, educated, cautious, publicly principled. But beneath the architecture of Washington respectability, her name sat on a trust account maintained by Wardell Analytics, a shadow consultancy that built risk models for strategic stability initiatives. The initiative, it turned out, had one purpose: to profit from disaster without appearing to cause it. When the crash hit, she was supposed to be asleep. The program, called the Meridian Protocol, had been coded by a private contractor within the Department of Economic Security. Its public role: simulate contagion response during market stress. Its hidden role: trigger high-frequency arbitrage across protected liquidity corridors immune to ordinary regulation. The profits were automatic. The ethics automatic too, because no human pressed the button. By dawn, her phone overflowed with headlines. Unprecedented meltdown, total crypto market cap down 60%. Her father was already on a call with the Treasury. The world was screaming for accountability. And Clara, seated in the private wing of the executive residence, watched her name embedded deep in the protocol's ownership log. Not as a bystander, but as beneficiary one. She hadn't written the code. She hadn't even approved the transfer. But she recognized the pattern. Her father's inner circle had turned national security tools into family wealth pipelines. The system was designed to protect America's markets from collapse, yet it had chosen her wallet as the refuge of capital. That was the first move, the quiet coronation of privilege disguised as contingency planning. Over the next 48 hours, Clara's expression became a case study in composure. Publicly, she offered statement of concern, sympathy for citizens whose savings had evaporated. Privately, she met with Daniel Rusk, the architect of Meridian and her father's unofficial economic advisor. Rusk was everything Washington built when it wanted silence, immaculate diction, no digital footprint, and a face that never perspired. He congratulated her with the neutrality of a surgeon. The protocol functioned as intended. You were our control wallet, on proof that the continuity network survived impact. Clara asked how it could generate profit from chaos. Rusk replied, "Because chaos is liquidity, Miss Holt. The difference between loss and gain is who knows when the floor is fake." That was the second move. He didn't explain the mechanism, only the philosophy. That stability is an illusion managed by those who understand its expiry date. By the end of that meeting, Clara knew the truth. Every safeguard in the national system had been re-engineered to feed one outcome: controlled collapse monetized by insiders before regulation could respond. And her father's administration was selling it as resilience. From that point, she stopped sleeping. She began studying the data herself: lines of transaction metadata, encrypted trails through sovereign funds, anonymous wallets traced to political donors. Every hour revealed another layer of betrayal. Yet curiosity turned to calculation. If the system was rigged, she thought, perhaps she could redirect it. Perhaps power could be used against itself. But power, like capital, never changes hands. It only changes masks. That night, as the White House Situation Room processed casualty reports from financial suicide hotlines, Clara sat before her terminal, reprogramming Meridian's contingency node. She didn't know if she was correcting the system or joining it. She only knew that she refused to be the daughter written out of her own fortune. By the third day after the collapse, global markets behaved like trauma patients, twitching, stabilizing, then crashing again. Official statements described it as algorithmic volatility. Behind closed doors, Russ called it harvesting season. Each minor dip generated profit streams through the Meridian Protocol, not into government stabilization accounts, but into private liquidity shelters built beneath the architecture of public trust. There were 52 wallets in total. 51 belonged to political families, senior regulators, and a handful of global financiers. The last one was Clara's. She tracked the pattern. Every crisis transfer mirrored a cabinet decision made 24 hours earlier. Every recovery spike coincided with a public reassurance speech. The choreography was immaculate. Morality dressed as macroeconomics. In those patterns, Clara saw the true nature of control. The crash was never an accident. It was an instrument. Fear wasn't a failure of the system. It was the system's fuel. When she confronted Rusk again, he didn't deny it. He told her the crash had been inevitable, a controlled demolition of unsustainable belief. Her father's administration, he claimed, had only guided the fall to protect stability. "We didn't destroy faith, Clara," Rusk said. "We monetized it." She asked him who we included. He smiled without teeth. "Everyone who understands that markets aren't democratic." That sentence remained in her mind like a scar. For a week, she pretended compliance. She attended briefings, issued statements, played the role of empathetic heir to shaken republic, but at night she tunneled through the encrypted infrastructure of Meridian itself. She discovered a mirror server hidden inside a defense communications node, a private backdoor where the algorithm's yield was copied before public reporting. It was the digital equivalent of printing invisible money. When she opened the directory, she saw her father's initials in the authorization log. That was when clarity replaced outrage. The system wasn't corrupt because it failed. It was corrupt because it succeeded exactly as designed. The next phase came naturally, precision replacing morality. She isolated a branch of the protocol, redirected its liquidity pulse from Wardell Analytics to a private offshore reserve under her own control. It was the same mechanism her father used, but this time without his oversight. For the first time, she wasn't an accessory. She was an architect. Her plan wasn't revenge, it was equilibrium. If the powerful would never be punished, she would become power itself, fluent in its code, indistinguishable from the system that birthed her. By the second week, investigators uncovered fragments of the Meridian network. Reporters called it the most sophisticated insider apparatus in economic history. Names leaked, markets wavered again. The White House denied everything. Rusk vanished. Officially relocated to an international conference. Unofficially, he was dead 2 days later in a parking structure beneath Arlington, his throat opened with surgical precision. Clara never asked who ordered it. She didn't need to. When she stood before her father in the private residence that night, he looked older. Not from guilt, but from recognition. He understood she knew everything. She understood he had always expected she would. "You think you're different from me," he said quietly. "You think integrity makes you immune, but you've already used the system. You've already taken your share." She replied with the calm detachment of a surgeon delivering prognosis. "Then maybe the cure requires infection." That was the climax. Not a confession, not an apology, but a passing of the disease. The following morning, a Senate inquiry began. Markets opened 15% higher, buoyed by rumors of recovery. Behind those numbers, Clara executed her final command, a silent transfer of Meridian's remaining assets into anonymous philanthropic funds. A gesture that looked altruistic, but still anchored her as controller of the flow. She dismantled the architecture her father built, but kept the keys. Justice was never the goal. Continuity was. By month's end, the crash was a historical headline sanitized into charts and commentary. Investors moved on. Politicians changed language. Public faith reset itself, like a wound forced to heal over infection. Clara Holt's wealth, now public knowledge, was attributed to inherited trust distributions. No investigation touched her. No journalist found the missing server. She became the symbol of resilience, the young reformer who guided post-crash reconstruction. Her father retired with dignity, his name preserved in the official narrative of recovery. But inside her private office, beneath biometric security, Meridian still pulsed quietly. It was no longer a weapon. It was a mirror, proof that catastrophe could be monetized, controlled, and reborn. She looked at the data one last time. The profit curves born from panic, the algorithms tuned to human despair. And in that sterile glow, she understood the final equation of power. Corruption doesn't destroy systems, it completes them. The line became her doctrine. cold, perfect, irreversible. The lesson was never about money. It was about architecture, who designs collapse, who survives it, and who learns to breathe underwater when everyone else drowns. And so, the president's daughter didn't steal from the crash. She simply understood it faster than the rest of the world. If the weight of this story resonated, subscribe to Betrayal and Billions, where power, morality, and money collide in the shadows of control.